right. You're listening to America's Voice Now. We're back. We're going to talk here a little bit about what is going on with the Senate and how they have provided authority, their permission for this the Syrian conflict. And we now know, and let's get something very clear so that you understand my position on this issue. Assad is a monster. And no one should have any doubt about whether or not Assad is a monster. He's a monster. But he's a monster who's really not a threat to us. In other words, he doesn't threaten the United States in any way, shape, or form. He doesn't have the capability to launch attacks here. He doesn't have the capability to launch weapons here. He may have a couple of sleeper cells that they could slip in here or something. But let me tell you something. His master, Iran, is a far greater risk to the United States, and you're going to hear about that in our fourth and final segment, where we talk about we listen to an interview with Michael Schur. But Iran is who they answer to, and Iran is the real true threat that we have here. So going after Assad, even though he's a monster and he is a killer and he is a despicable human being and a terrible leader, the simple truth is that he poses absolutely no threat to us as a nation. And so what we should be doing is looking at the issues of why are we involving ourselves in that conflict, and why is our Senate so willing to jump in here? Because listen, conservatively, the estimates are 100,000 people killed. The high end of that is 140,000 people killed in the last 2 years. He's used weapons of mass destruction in the form of gas on at least a dozen occasions. And yet, we're talking about 1,400 people being killed in this last one. The same people who were screaming bloody murder about how we had no business going into Iraq when we knew for a fact that Saddam Hussein had gassed tens of thousands of his citizens. These were the same guys who wanted to impeach Bush for that. And don't get me wrong, Bush was a traitor. Everybody's a traitor. Anyone in power in both sides of both parties are traitors. Make no mistake about it. We are fighting here against power that is so far beyond the title of Republican and Democrat that there is nothing that you can do or take into account that either of these parties has anything in concert or in your best interest. We have long ago ceased to have any influence whatsoever in the process that's involved now. We are nothing more than the payees to keep this whole thing going. And we're paying for these elitists to go in there and do their best to ensconce themselves in power and authority and might and money and whatever other things they're interested in. That's the simple truth of it, folks. Let's acknowledge and understand where we're coming from. The Republicans have betrayed us a long time ago. The Democrats betrayed us a long time ago. Neither of them represent us. We know that because we have seen evidence of it over and over and over and over and over again. I had a conversation yesterday about party politics and how parties are the downfall of the political system in the United States of America. And the simple truth is, when you've got two parties that give us the illusion that we have some say in the game, it's designed to be, for all intents and purposes, a theatrical presentation. We have no true input into what really goes on in government. What we do have is the ability to, for all intents and purposes, act like we do so that we're assuaged into feeling like we've had some input so we can all go back to sleep again and worry about our 401ks and whether we got a Jaguar or a Suzuki to drive. And, what can we do to improve our own little shoebox that we live in and doll up our yards? That's all that we're here for. And we're pacified with the idea that there is some influence, there is some influence and some traction in the approach that we take to making decisions or government's decision process. Let me tell you something. It couldn't be further from the truth. They couldn't give. They don't care about you. They couldn't care less whether or not you are happy, sad, wealthy, poor, starving, destitute, living in a cigar box, or whether you are, living in a king's mansion. The truth of the matter is that we really have zero impact on what they do. We are only given the illusion that we have some influence. But the reality is we have zero. None whatsoever. And when we talk about the reality of what's going on with the Senate voting for this, I mean, here's a perfect example. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff yesterday. Now, all right, so let's understand who is the chairman. We've all heard that term many times, right? The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. High up military. Okay, here's who he is. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is the highest-ranking military officer in the nation. There is no one higher. He has direct access to the president. The president theoretically seeks their counsel about, military matters and issues surrounding, right? Martin Dempsey is his name. He's Joint Chiefs of Staff General Martin Dempsey. I believe he's 4-star, if I'm not mistaken. He was asked yesterday in a Senate hearing, during a questioning from Senator Bob Corker from Tennessee about a resolution authorizing military action there. Now, this is a short clip, but I want you to hear it because it's very, very telling what he has to say. I'm going to tell you what he said first, and then I want you to hear it because when you hear it in context, it makes a difference. He was asked about what is the goal over there. And so Corker said to him, what are we trying to accomplish there? And Dempsey came back and said, the answer to whether I support additional support for the moderate opposition is yes. The answer to whether I support additional support for the moderate opposition is yes. Corker comes back and says, and this authorization will support those activities in addition to responding to the weapons of mass destruction. Listen to the way it's phrased there. And Dempsey comes back and says, I don't know how the resolution will evolve, but I support. Corker interrupts and says, what you're seeking. What is it you're seeking? And Dempsey says, I can't answer that, what we're seeking. All right. So listen to Corker's words. And this authorization will support those activities in addition to responding to the weapons of mass destruction. Now, understand what that sentence is. This authorization will support what activities in addition to responding to the weapons of mass destruction? If we're going over there to eliminate sarin gas, what other activities are we supportive of that don't involve sarin gas? Explain to me exactly what that is. And Dempsey comes back and says, I don't know how the resolution will evolve, but I support it. And Corker comes back and says, okay, so exactly what is it you're seeking? And he says, I can't answer that, what we're seeking. How can you tell me that the senior-most military mind in the United States of America, who is sitting there whispering sweet nothings into the ear of the sycophantic illegal alien currently occupying the White House, does not know the policy of what we seek to go to war in a week? It's beyond comprehension, folks. I mean, really. It's stunning. Listen to this.
The answer to whether I support additional support for the moderate opposition is yes.
And this authorization will support those activities in addition to responding to the weapons of mass destruction.
Okay, you hear that? So this authorization will support those activities. Stop. In addition to responding to the weapons of mass destruction. So what are these other activities that it will support? I mean, really, you have to understand the implications of what we're talking about here.
Of mass destruction.
I don't know how the resolution will evolve, but I support
what you're seeking. What is it you're seeking?
I can't answer that.
So I don't know what the resolution will involve, and I don't know how it will evolve. But I support, and whatever he said at the end there, Corker cut him off, and it was unintelligible. But here's what you're saying. This guy says, I give blanket approval to whatever it is that we're going over there for. We don't really know what we're going over there for. We have no set process and plan. Our goal is just to get over there and get you to say, we have your permission. I mean, how malfeasant is that? Hang on. Here it comes.
I support
What you're seeking. What is it you're seeking?
I can't answer that, what we're seeking.
The action, if it is authorized.
He can't answer what we're seeking. You've got to be kidding me. And then Kerry interrupts because he doesn't want Dempsey to go out there and make the wrong statement. I mean, guys, this is like the reality of these kinds of statements and hearings is it's almost incomprehensible to me that this is what this is what we've fallen to. The second article out here is the Joint Chiefs chairman criticizes the leak of Syria military plans. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the president's top military advisor, told the Senate on Tuesday that U.S. plans for attacks on Syria were made more difficult by leaks to the press and the president's delay in ordering the strikes. I'm going to tell you why there are leaks to the press. There are a lot of folks in this administration that I believe are seeing the handwriting on the wall. They're not in a position where they can influence the direction or the decisions that are being made that are going to drag us into a very dangerous place. And they have been silenced either because of their lack of position or because they are literally threatened and coerced into silence. And so they're leaking. The premise behind the leak is, let me get the word out and hopefully somebody, somewhere, will be listening to what I have to say. And so they're leaking all of these pieces of information with the distinct concept that hopefully this will change and drive public opinion to affect the decision-making process in the Senate. Now, for the record, let's understand something and how deeply divided the United States is on this. There's a poll that's out on Drudge Report that's been out there since the 2nd. And the poll says simply this: give Obama authority to conduct military operation in Syria, yes or no? Now, the poll is now closed, so you can't vote. But let's understand what it says. The answer of yes, give Obama authority, is 8%, 8.42 to be precise. No, do not give Obama authority, is 91.5%. 91.5%. What that means, folks, is that we really don't want, as a nation, to get involved here. And yet these people are saying to us, it's really not your place to make that decision. We know more than you do, so we're going to do it anyway. The problem with that, of course, is, first of all, I'm tired of hearing the national security excuse from Congress as to why we're not allowed to know what influences your decision-making process on our behalf. It's one thing to say, we can't tell you about a terrorist activity that we had to save you from, because even that, I disagree with it, but even that, you could give them a plausible argument for why even I could make up a good argument for why they could say that. But when you're talking about an issue that has no national security significance to the United States of America and has no imminent threat to the United States of America, there is no secrecy blanket that applies. End of discussion. End of argument. We are entitled to full, open, and disclosed knowledge, full disclosure as to what is motivating your decision. Now, we'll never know that because Congress has been bought and paid for, and this president has too. Their handlers are telling them what to do. That's the truth. These guys are so far compromised. The articles out here are just so blatantly frightening about how far down the rabbit hole we've fallen. The international community's credibility is on the line. That's the argument, right? Obama comes out and he says, my credibility is not on the line. The international community's credibility is on the line. And America and Congress's credibility is on the line because we give lip service to the notion that these international norms are important. When those videos first broke and you saw images of over 400 children subjected to gas, everybody expressed outrage. How can this happen in this modern world? Well, it happened because a government chose to deploy those deadly gas weapons on civilian populations. Stop right there. The articles and the pictures that they've been showing you in the press on the mainstream Ministry of Propaganda, you know what those pictures are? We now know, and there's some images that we'll talk about in our fourth segment when we listen to Sure, that a lot of those images that you're seeing are not Syrian. You know what those are? Those are pictures from Iraq when Saddam Hussein killed 5,000 in one village. So what are we being shown? We're being shown images of something that happened 12 years ago by the tyrant who these people said Bush should be impeached for going after. I mean, the hypocrisy and the hubris is just outstanding. Further quote. So the question is, how credible is the international community when it says this is an international norm that has to be observed? Hey, let me tell you something. The international community is not fighting this war. They've already opted out, dude. They are not participating. Cameron can't get his own parliament to agree. The French have backed off. Russia says no, that this isn't even Assad's weapon of mass destruction. This was the rebels' use of a weapon to draw us in. So he goes on to say this. So the question is, how credible is the international community when it says this is an international norm that has to be observed? The question is, how credible is Congress when it passes a treaty saying we have to forbid the use of chemical weapons? Stop right there. He's lying to you. Do you know that Assad and Syria are not a signatory to the Chemical Weapons Treaty? Did you even know that? Does the mainstream ministry point that out? They refuse to sign. They're not even a party to the treaty. So what you're telling me is they didn't agree to the treaty, but we're going to impose it on them anyway. I'm not suggesting that they should or shouldn't have. I don't even care. The point is, if we said we're not going to sign the treaty for the Second Amendment small arms treaty from the United Nations, does that give the international community the right to come in here and say, it doesn't matter how sovereign a nation you are, we're taking your Second Amendment privilege away and we're confiscating all the guns in the USA? You see, that's the argument the United States should be looking at. Turn the tables and evaluate it from another perspective. If the United States says we are not a party to the small arms treaty, and we're not, but the international community gets together and says it doesn't matter that you haven't signed the treaty, we all did, and we're going to impose our will on your country, we as a sovereign nation would say, bring it on. Come and get them. Milan, lave. Come and take them. Why should anything be different with Assad and Syria? I'm asking you flat out. I'm not supporting Assad. He's a monster. He's a terrorist. He's a killer. But it's up to his people to put him down. It's not our problem. We don't belong there. The real motivations for this war are not United States interests. Obama is sitting here talking about how credible is Congress when it passes a treaty saying we have to forbid the use of chemical weapons that Assad and Syria are not even a signatory to. Now, if they had signed the treaty, okay, I would get the argument. But you don't even have that credible position. Mr. Obama, you're a fraud and you're a deceitful liar. He goes on to say, I do not think that we have to act, because if we don't, we are effectively saying that even though we may condemn it and issue resolutions and so forth, somebody who is not shamed by resolutions will continue to act with impunity, and those international norms begin to erode. What this tells you is exactly how President Obama views the sovereignty of this country domestically and all other sovereign nations. Because what he's saying is that international norms are more important than whether you signed a treaty or didn't, whether you are a participant in Agenda 21 or the Small Arms Treaty. You see, or the Kyoto global warming issues. If you're not a signatory, you cannot be held to the same terms of those who agreed. It's that simple. Why is that? Because you can't sit there and tell me that we have ordered, that we are orchestrating and ordering a war for a treaty which they're not a participant in. How dare you? And you see, here's the real challenge. He's making you think by his omission, his lie of omission, and the implied statement that Syria is a participant in this treaty. They're not. They are not. So the question is, how credible is the international community when it says this is an international norm that has to be observed? The question is, how credible is Congress when it passes a treaty saying we have to forbid the use of chemical weapons? It's only a treaty when they've agreed to it. If they have not agreed to it, it's not a treaty, folks. Is this the same argument that we're going to hear from Obama when the Senate, under enormous pressure from the United States citizenry, says after he signs the Small Arms Treaty, which he's going to slip through at some point. We know he will. He's already stated he's going to. And then it's going to come up for a Senate vote, right? If the Senate is afraid to actually sign it because they're afraid that Americans are going to literally go to physical war against their own government over this issue, is this the argument he's going to make? Well, it's an international norm, so we have to do it, even though we haven't signed the treaty? You betcha. You know how? I know because he's doing it right now with Agenda 21, and he's also doing it right now with small arms and weapons and guns in the Second Amendment. He passes executive orders as if they have some credible positioning. They don't. We have a Second Amendment that is inviolate. That's the end of the argument. Shall not be infringed. That doesn't leave any room for negotiation. It doesn't leave any room for limitation. It doesn't. I'm going to show you. I'm going to tell you a little secret. And I'm going to prove to you that the founders meant that there should literally be absolutely zero limitations on firearms. I know this is off the topic of Syria, but it's pertinent to this issue of Second Amendment issues, and it's important one for you to know. And it's one that you can use in an argument every time and win. Do you know that there is, in the Constitution, the concept of marque and reprisal? Marque and reprisal, ships of marque, were Jefferson, in fact, used the concept of marque, which is to allow a private military vessel to go out and fight the Barbary pirates. In other words, this was a military vessel that was privately owned, but it was military outfitted, okay? And the United States had no fear that the owner of that vessel or that the captain of that vessel would use that vessel against the government of the United States. In fact, he was so confident that he actually said to that vessel, "You go and fight Barbary pirates on behalf of the United States government, and we will pay you to fight it." So our founders weren't afraid for Americans to own weapons. Only a government in tyranny is afraid of your possession of a weapon. Think about that. Would the government allow you to own a fleet of F-16s now? No way. We'll be back in just a minute. We're going to take a quick break. Find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org. Find us on YouTube at youtube.com/America's Voice Now. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Libya and the aftermath of what we did over there and how that has descended into complete and utter lawlessness. We'll be back in just a few moments. Stick with us. And when we come back, we're going to also hear that Michael Schauer interview in our fourth segment. We'll be back.